the self-talk that gets inherited either from trauma or just from upbringing. Because, we don't start with some of the self-talk that we currently have.
Yes.
That gets installed over time. It gets installed by our parents, by our grandparents, by the school system, by friends, by mentors.
Are you ready to unlock stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation? Well, you're in the right place. This is the Knocking Doors Down podcast, where we dive deep into the journeys of individuals who've overcome life's toughest challenges. I'm your host, Jason LaChance, and in my addiction recovery, I've found that I had a passion for speaking with others that have transcended traumas, challenging times, and most difficult situations that they've faced. And on this podcast, you're going to hear everything from addiction to recovery, from adversity to success, from mental and physical illness to prosperity. So tune in each and every week to the powerful conversations that my guests and I have. And hey, if it's your first time, hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, or if it's YouTube and you're watching, hit that subscribe button. Do me a favor, also leave a thumb up and a comment in the video, because not only do I see it, but my guests do as well. Speaking of guests, my guest is Dr. Maiysha Clairborn. She's an author, a TEDX speaker, podcast host of the Black Mind Garden podcast, a master practitioner of NLP and hypnosis, and the founder of the Mind Remapping Academy, a school of NLP, hypnosis, and timeline therapy. Dr. Clairborn and I dig into a multitude of things, including how listening impacts our interactions and relationships with others. We talk how to delve deeper and find the root of self-doubt and self-defeating thoughts and actions. We dig into strategies to boost confidence and attract greater success. As well, we dig into belief change and how to navigate resistance. And we also converse about balance between celebrating your wins and staying focused. We talk all of that and so much more on this episode of Knocking Doors Down. Dr. Clairborn, thank you for joining me on Knocking Doors Down.
Thank you so much, Jason, for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. This will be fun getting acquainted and just, I mean, goodness, you do work in your trauma-informed coach, trainer, keynote speaker. You've done TED Talks. You've done so much that fascinates me that I've kind of in that rediscovery life through my recovery, have an interest in and read and study a lot. Of course, not at your level of being a doctor, but I'm excited to have this conversation. But I like to start with gratitude because it's how I start my day. 3 things you're grateful for.
Oh, I am grateful for my son and the relationship that we have. Um, I'm grateful that I get to work from home. I mean, like that is just the best, especially with my introversion. I love my own company. And I'm grateful for my community. I have over time, it has taken me a while. I'm here in Atlanta for those who are listening, and it's taken me a while to build that community. So I'm very grateful for my community and especially my mom community.
I love it. I love it. Let me ask you, through your work, starting with gratitude, I've not had anyone on that, is a trauma-informed coach, has your doctorate. What do you see with gratitude and the practice of gratitude and maybe rewiring of neural pathways, just, a lot of those, that transformational change that a lot of people seek out? And when I get asked, and I do say, I'm not a doctor, but gratitude has changed my life greatly. So now I get to ask a doctor about it.
Yes, yes. Well, first of all, I will share with you that I have a personal practice of gratitude as well. Every
Mm.
morning, I started it many, many, many years ago, back in 2007. I was told by a mentor of mine to get a gratitude journal and to do 30 days of gratitude, and 30 days turned into, I don't know, 15 years or so. So I resonate with that
Yeah.
personally. And what I'll share with you from a personal perspective, and then I'll kind of share from from the neuroscience perspective, but from a personal perspective, it really, like, I wake up in the morning and before my feet touch the ground, I pick up my gratitude journal and I write, you know. And what it has done over time is it just like focuses on my mind. It sets my day. Like it's the
Mm.
energy for the day,
Mm.
gratitude. And from a neuroscience perspective, from a brain perspective, it actually directs your focus. And what we know is that what you think about, where you put your focus, is how you frame your day. Right? So our conscious mind is our goal setter, and our unconscious mind is our goal getter.
Mm,
And when we start with gratitude, whether it's gratitude for the things we have or gratitude for the things that are on the way, we actually focus our mind in that direction. And so it opens our mind up to see more of the things that the positives rather than the things that we're lacking.
yes, yes, absolutely. It was funny last night. My partner, her and I went. She's never seen pro wrestling live, so I took her to her first event, and we're in Central California. And boy, the rain was coming down, and that's a stressful drive, and that was the first thing we both went. Because we're people of faith. We went, well, thank God for safe passage. Because you forget about the storm and the wind kind of blowing the car around and people driving crazy, and you're like, oh my God, it's you're doing 80 and the rain's coming like this. So it really is such a powerful thing, especially when I find now it is a subconscious reaction. I've moved it from conscious to subconscious.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you are practicing it daily and it does sort of like seep into the cells, then anything could be happening. And you're like, well, at least, it sometimes sounds like at least this, but it's really like that's gratitude in the background. Well, whew, at least we made it safely, or at least it's not snowing, or, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Right? Well, I like finding out the why with folks, and I mean, you're doing such amazing stuff with your career and podcast and helping people. But what was the why for you? Why did you want to explore the areas that you do?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think it comes from my upbringing. And so
Mm,
I grew up in a home witnessing domestic abuse.
mm,
I also grew up in a home with addiction, and 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 which I think played into the domestic abuse, addiction, and mental health. My stepfather, he was a veteran, and you know, there's that whole story that
yeah.
played into it through the addiction and then the violence. And for me, and I don't think I knew this moving into it, but when I got into college, I was always pre-med, but I was initially studying chemistry, and I realized about, in my second chemistry class, that wasn't it for me. And I needed to do something else. And I found Psych 101, and it was all about the why behind human behavior.
Mm,
And so coming from the kind of home that I came from, that really it pulled me, and especially when I took my first abnormal psychology class, and it was talking about addiction, it was talking about mental health disorders, it really drew me in. And so for me, I think it was an opportunity for me to understand, why do people do the things that they do? And I think initially it's from a healing standpoint, but now it's actually more from an empowering standpoint. Like, why do we do the things that we do so we can heal from the traumas that we have and shift our future?
yeah. I've been reading a really great book. I don't know if you ever heard of Dr. Ariely. It's on irrational behavior. So there's a show on TV now called The Irrational with Jesse Martin. I love that show. I love
Yes.
great actor. Well, it's based on his book and kind of his circumstances, and
Yeah.
it's really interesting to dig in. I'm just getting to the part where he kind of touches on addictive behavior, because people, I think for the I wouldn't I think we've gotten more educated over the last few years that we always think, oh, addiction is, this chemical, this drug, alcohol, whatever it is. And I think our minds are opening up to know there's so much more, that we have addictive behaviors that that are pretty irrational as a person that had a lot
Yes,
of them.
absolutely. I'm gonna have to look for that book, though. That sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, I'll email you the link there to check it out. But so how in your practice then, through going through college, did you start to kind of maybe understand addictive behavior a little bit more, why people might fall into it. I mean, it's so complex. We don't have a finite answer yet, but we're getting
Well,
more.
honestly, I think that was sort of the beginning.
Mm,
I think what I understood coming out of college was we're conditioned. We're
mm,
conditioned to behave.
mm.
And that was sort of my takeaway from my psych majors. We're conditioned to this behavior, and there's ways that we can extinguish it, and then we're liable to come back. So that was kind of like that primer for what happens in addiction, and it's really what happens in behavior in general, like the stages of change, right? You go through the stages of change, you take an action, you extinct the behavior or you stop a behavior, but there's always the chance of recycling back into that behavior, right? And so that was just, I think, very much a beginning for me. For me, I think when I after medical school, after residency, because once you get sucked into the curriculum of medical school, everything else just falls away. But when I started my practice, I'm in like holistic medicine was where I started. I got really back into what's the underlying cause of disease, what's the underlying cause of stress, what's the underlying cause of resistance of patients to follow, agree to be empowered with their healthcare. And I started to get back into that and really understand the conditioning piece.
Yeah. What point did you really want to have a holistic approach to things?
Interestingly enough, from the beginning,
Oh,
I,
okay.
yeah, I was introduced to this book called Between Heaven and Earth when I was in college.
Hmm.
And it talked about health in a very different way. It talked about it from this very spiritual, the five element theory, and related it to the earth and energy. And I was so drawn into that. But I had already been accepted to medical school at that point, and I saw an opportunity to integrate that in. And I, at the time, didn't know how that was going to happen. I just knew that it needed to happen. And so I was studying my traditional medicine, but then I had these like traditional Chinese medical texts, and I was like dabbing into energy work. Became a Reiki master, and I was dabbling into essential oils. And so I was a very unique medical student, most of my classmates would say, and resident. And so I knew from the beginning that my path was actually going to be very different. And I started out that way. I never went into traditional practice. I started out marrying the two and just sort of like grew over time.
Knocking Doors Down by Carlos Vieira, now available wherever you get audiobooks.
I wasn't done partying, and I didn't want the binge to end. I think I knew that when I finally got home, I'd have to face what I had done, and I wasn't ready to do that. Being responsible for my actions wasn't something I was looking forward to. I had abandoned my wife and baby, my family, and my business. I wanted to avoid the shame of returning to what I had left behind. Even though I was not yet going home, I wasn't sure I had enough resources to continue the binge.
Click the link in the podcast description to find out more. Did you face any resistance with that? It
Oh,
just,
but yes.
please, it just seems like you would, like, you're not doing it the way we tell you it's done. It's like,
Oh, well,
if it
so
worked, it would be working for people.
right. Interestingly enough, I didn't get resistance until after residency.
Hmm.
So I actually, I went to Morehouse School of Medicine. I'm here in Atlanta. It's a historically Black college medical school. And I think there was just an open mind around that, right?
Hmm.
Especially my classmates. We were a small class. But surprisingly, when I went into residency, and I thought I'd get much more resistance, my mentor, my advisor, and a lot of the attendings and especially my classmates really leaned in and were very interested. It was very different. But then I also went to a very diverse residency program. It wasn't until I got out of residency, got back into the real world of practice, that I started getting resistance. And so I would go to these networking events or go to conferences, and I'd begin to discuss these things. And my colleagues would be like, oh, so you're doing that thing. And it wouldn't be so much what they said, it would be what they didn't say and the look on their face and their body language, right? I
Right.
talk about communication being only 7% words and 93% everything else. And their 93% said a lot. And so I really started to pull back from the medical community and found people who were, I would say, medically adjacent to me. So like therapists were interested, chiropractors, massage therapists, body workers, other energy workers. They were all very interested. And I built my health worker community in that way. I didn't get any resistance from patients because they came to me because the traditional was not working for them, right? And yet I was still a trained traditional. I was still a medical doctor. And so I can see the benefit of both sides, right? And that was where I began to educate my colleagues. And over time, as you now know, integrative medicine, I'm of a certain age, called almost 50.
Me too.
Okay. And so, back in that day, it was before like integrative medicine was all popular. Now, as you know, integrative medicine, functional medicine, holistic medicine, all of that is much more commonplace. And I know out in California, y'all were way ahead of us in the South. So, we're still catching up. We're still catching up with you.
Yeah, I think the tough thing that I saw was you would have people that it was like, you don't have an educational background, so it was hard to maybe validate them as a practitioner. And so I think like you've done that awesome marrying of both, because I think, especially with addiction and oftentimes trauma, so many of us, if not all of us, are spiritually broken. And so we have some other things than just our liver, our kidneys, our brain that need some healing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to reframe what you just said around being broken, because
Please.
we have the belief, and this is something that I've seen in our culture, in our society, is that we run with the conversation of brokenness. And I think that can really slow the healing. And so I'd love to say, well, we go through what we go through, right? We have the experiences that we have, and they impact us. There is trauma that's there, and we have all the internal resources that we need to mend those wounds. So maybe there's wounds, but like if you think about, let's say, a weeping willow, right? They're some of the strongest trees out there. And so the branches, they can bend and bend and bend, but they're very hard to break. And even if you think about very tall trees, I don't know, I think, was it the redwoods that are out in Northern California?
Oh, yes.
Can sustain, they have the resilience to sustain the winds. So they sway, but they don't always break.
Right.
And so as people, we have our experiences, we have our wounds, and we have the capacity to heal those wounds. I think you're only broken when you're dead.
I like that. And thank you for that, because I live by a slogan, even got the shirt on, you can't see it, no outside solutions to inside problems. And people have asked me about that. And I guess, me even using broken is still having that vernacular in my head, because I personally, for me, and as a person of faith, I kind of look back at, I was being prepared for something, and until I was able to step up to what I was being prepared for, I was maybe a little incomplete. I don't know how to say it, that there was something of me that was still missing, but it was in me to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and there can be that experience of incompletion. I think we all have that in different ways. Like we say in the world of trauma informedness, 100% of people, like the penetrance of trauma is 100%, which means 100% of people have been informed in some way by trauma.
Have you dug into the archives of past Knocking Doors Down podcast episodes? The Knocking Doors Down podcast archive is available to you for free. Check it out. Here's a snippet from when Charlie Sheen was on the podcast.
AA is not the best place for for a famous atheist. I kept looking for that fucking chapter. So yeah, but it's not a one size fits all.
Sure.
It's like saying that we all think the same, like our brains are built the same. They're just not.
Right. Yeah.
There's such uniqueness involved.
Check out this episode and so many more in the Knocking Doors Down archive. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumb up, leave a comment, and share with somebody else that you know will get value out of the Knocking Doors Down podcast.
We all have experienced trauma in some way. Just looking at the pandemic, right? Just looking at everyone has been touched in some way by trauma. And so that does leave that feeling of incompletion. That does leave that wound. And I think what's so beautiful about the work that I do is helping people to understand that it is in them to heal and that we need each other to heal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's that connection. That's it's why I do the work I do. It's why I actually love podcasting and love guesting on podcasts, because the more I connect, the more we connect to our own and each other's humanity. And whether we know it or not, that in and of itself is filling and it's healing.
Absolutely. I've have people oftentimes, newcomers to group or whatever it might be, ask me, hey, what do you think the key is for long-term sobriety? And I always say, the two things that have worked is connection to a like-minded and positive group and a sense of, something greater than you, be it a higher power, God, whatever you want to call it. Without those things that I did a really good job of rejecting, because I'm naturally an introvert too, but part of me really wants to be an extrovert. But I didn't know how to do it. So, the anxiety and everything else, what would calm it down? Okay, this would be the shaky hand. Oh, you put the drink in it? Calm.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've changed my nervous state. I've changed my state of being at that particular time, but I was doing it with something external when I didn't have to, because now if I feel it, I just, some good breath work and I'm calm. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. Funny how you can retrain your nervous system, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I want to ask you, because I've had people, I still do have some areas. I had a doctor, he believes I have hypervigilance due to some physical trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And he had recommended, but I can't find anyone in my area, NLP.
Yes.
So exploring that, was that something apart that initially when you were getting your doctorate that you were going through, or is this maybe something later on that you really wanted to explore to provide to individuals?
I found NLP about 5 years into my private practice. And how I found it was, when I owned my business, when I first started my business back in the day before the interwebs, before social media, we had to pound the pavement.
Yeah.
And so I would go around and meeting colleagues. Like I said, I built a community of clinically adjacent people, and two people, one was a practitioner of NLP and the other one was a hypnotherapist. And so right around 2009, I got to experience it for myself. And in 2013, which is about 5 years into my practice, is when I decided, I think I should add this in, because I felt like that with the work that I was doing with my patients at that time, I was already doing some really good work unearthing some root cause of stress and resistance and trauma experience in healthcare for patients particularly. But I felt like if I could get into the subconscious, the unconscious, the real root, then I could do some real good work. And that's sort of where I started, is using it clinically with patients. And so I would use hypnosis. There's an NLP technique called Time Line Therapy, which is a trauma-informed way to help people release old impact of negative emotions, impact of trauma, the thought processes that go along with trauma, the self-talk that gets inherited, either from trauma or just from upbringing. Because, we don't start with some of the self-talk that we currently have.
Yes.
That gets installed over time. It gets installed by our parents, by our grandparents, by the school system, by friends, by mentors, all of the things. And so that's really how it came for me. And once I began training, um, I fell in love with it. And so I became a master practitioner, and I actually became a trainer. So now I actually teach the work. I still do one-on-one work with people, but I teach other coaches how to do this work with people because, again, it is trauma informed and trauma responsive. And it's something that we all need in terms of, like, we all need to have someone who can speak that trauma informed language.
And you said something that's that I find so valuable, that I was able to gain the understanding of, a lot of that self-talk and through trauma in my childhood, growing up in a home addiction, going through some sexual abuse at an early age, was I was really attached to a certain story about myself that I was telling myself. And it took so long, like you said, to realize this is not coming in my voice. These are coming in the voices of others. And that is such, I think, it's a challenging shift to make, but we're all capable of it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the wonderful things about NLP, and I'll come back and sort of define it just for people who may not have heard of it.
Sure.
But one of the things that it's just so beautiful about this work is that it does really get to the root of those conversations, and it helps you to see something different about yourself, right? It helps you to see all of those things that you thought about yourself are not true. Here's what's actually true about that circumstance or that situation. It doesn't take away the situation, but it takes away the way you view the situation, or it shifts and the way you view the situation such that you can release the negative emotion, the negative self-talk, all of the things that was there for you, and then see a new view of yourself, and also see out to the future, like, oh, these are all the places where that's impacted me. Now I can release that too.
Mm-hmm.
So while it's a release of the mind, it also becomes a physiological detox as well, right? Because we now know that not only do we hold trauma in the brain, we hold trauma in the body. And so oftentimes when I work with people, sometimes they'll have like a catharsis, and I tell them afterwards, like, drink lots of water, go sleep, because your body is going to detox the rest of that. It's like an emotional detox, but it leaves people so free. And it doesn't mean you don't still have to do the work, like you still have to focus on what you want. You still have to reframe yourself from time to time. It's not like a magic bullet, but it gives you the freedom of, oh, you know what? That was inherited. That's not mine.
Mm-hmm.
What's the learning that I took from that last time? Okay, let's apply it here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think an example to maybe share with the listener on this one is, for me, I'm about 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in there. Pretty slim guy, and I grew really fast. So, everybody called me beanpole or whatever. So I would hunch to shrink myself. Or when people would comment, gosh, you make me feel so short. Well, I was a person, I don't like making people feel bad. I'm a recovering people pleaser as well, so you as well. Okay. So I would shrink myself. So I still, at the age of, am I going to be 46 this year, something I can't remember. Hunch my neck, hunch my shoulders. And these are things I still conscious, because I actually have some struggles with that. And it's caused some issues that, I have to be very conscious, shoulders back, proper posture. These are all things that really come to play out. And like you said, that those things in childhood, I never really understood until I was really digging into my sobriety. Like, I was doing so many things to make other people feel good in a disingenuous manner.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's not always conscious that it's disingenuous,
Yes.
right? And so we have to, it's useful to apply self-compassion. Like, oh wow, I didn't know I was doing that, you know, and now I can stop.
Right.
I used to not tell people I was a doctor
Really?
because I believed, because my mom is a retired dentist. And to give you context, uh, we grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, and my mom being a one of very few Black female successful dentists in Alabama, but she got some pushback and some feedback.
Sure.
And so she would go into banks or she would go into places, and I didn't understand this at the time because I was young, but she would always lead with, "I'm Doctor so and so," right? And I would think that was so pretentious. Like, why is she always throwing the doctor card? Like, I didn't understand where I was. And so I grew up, when I became a physician, I wouldn't face that forward.
Hmm.
I just wanted to be known for me, right? Not for doctor somebody. And so it wasn't until much later doing this work that I did, as of course doing the becoming a trainer means you have to do the work, right? And so that I discovered that I thought my mother was pretentious for always leading with that, when in actuality, she was being discriminated against. And that was sort of the way that she overcame that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so seeing that was like, oh, okay, I can be who I am as a compassionate, down to earth person, and I can also be a physician. Like, I can exist inside of both, and I can name it, and I can own my credentials, and I can own the work that I've done. Right? I don't have to hide.
Yeah.
And so that was something that, and it took me, once, even after I saw that, and even after I got the learnings, it took practice. This is why I said, it's not a magic bullet. It took practice. I had to push through the discomfort of, "I'm Dr. Maiysha, I'm Dr. Clairborne, you know, and not in the patient room, but just like on the outside,
Sure.
and even to this day, my mom moved to Mexico. She relocated, she and her husband. And so me and my son were there over the summer. And she would go around and introduce me. "This is my daughter. She's a doctor. This is my daughter." And at some point, I was like, "I'm gonna need you to stop introducing me to every single person as a
Oh.
doctor. And I know that you're proud of me. And maybe just tone that down a little bit."
But I can, I've had trouble too, like when people might, brag about what I've done. I had a 20-year career in radio, people with this podcast and the other stuff I do in nonprofit work, they might, "Oh, this is the guy that talked to Charlie Sheen on his podcast," or whatever, and it's like, yeah, I hope it helps someone, because I don't know. I don't know if it's being humble or it's that, like, lack of self-esteem. Like, I don't think I have negative or positive. It was just a non-existent idea for me for the longest time. So I'm not sure where I kind of land with it. On one hand, it's like, gosh, I hope it impacted people, and I should be confident if the work I've done has impacted anyone. But at the same time, it's like, I don't want to be the one to go, "Yeah, my work has helped people and I've gotten them into treatment and they've had long-term sobriety." It's such a weird dichotomy for me on how to land with that.
Yeah, it is one of those fine lines that we walk sometimes, when I think part of it is and I don't know about how you experienced this, but as a childhood, any speaking of our accolades was viewed as bragging, and bragging was viewed as wrong.
Mm,
And so it's the letting go of that aspect of it. Not just, it's like, and there's the intellectual letting go, and then there's the physiological letting go. And so it's the practicing and the pushing through, because even where I am now, like, I do have to speak about my accomplishments a lot. I do work in equity and diversity and inclusion, and I speak to a lot of, like, C-suite people, and they want to know that I
right.
can do the work that I do. So then I have to be like, yes, I'm a TEDx speaker, and yes, the work that I've done has, transformed this psychiatry department, and I worked with Yale on this, so it's become a little bit easier for me to do it. However, even in my like social environment, it's a little bit different. So I think it depends.
Right. Do you think that that's an understanding, a greater understanding of what identity is, and maybe knowing when you need to wear what hat? Because you bring up such a valid point. There are times your resume is really important. And then there's other times where it's like who you are as a person, kind, compassionate, loving. It's like it's always interesting when you ask people who are you? Well, I'm a engineer, and no. Who are you? Not what you do. And I think that there can be that confusion. I know that I've been there, and I still at times struggle with that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is a play into the this space of identity, and I think what happens is we separate our identities based on where we are in the moment. And I think when we can learn to embrace all of the identities, then, for example, like my work in equity is not separate from my work as from my motherhood.
Mm,
And
mm,
and when I'm in the martial arts studio, I am just as much of an activist as when I'm at my son's school picking him up. And if I see an injustice, or if I see someone talk to someone, in a way that is discriminatory or biased or unacceptable, I'm gonna speak in my dojo just as I would speak if I saw it happen in my son's school.
right.
And I'm a physician wherever I go. So if someone, you know, tell you the story, one of my instructors was doing an aerial and he twisted his ankle. And so, of course, like what comes out immediately is the doctor. And he's icing, and I'm just going over and checking on him. And also, the mom comes out because he's like 20 something. And, so I'm like one of the dojo moms, and I go over and I check on him. And I'm like, all right, you could try this, you can try that, you can try this, and making sure he's good. And so I think embracing all of the identities and just it helps us to be our most full and authentic self. And we naturally know what needs to come out in any given moment of time rather
Mm.
than, oh, I should hide this when I go. Like when I'm in the dojo, I'm not a doctor. No, I am a doctor.
Right, right.
I just like to fight, and throw people down and do forms and, it's a different context.
Yeah. Well, and I think let me get your take on this, is that oftentimes we allow others to pigeonhole us.
Absolutely.
Like, oh,
Absolutely.
you're a doctor, you're a mom, you shouldn't be. What martial arts do you study, by the way?
Kung Fu,
Oh, okay.
Shaolin. Yeah.
Okay. I've always
Yeah, my
wanted,
son.
I did jujitsu for about 4 years. Wasn't ever that good, but I loved doing it. So it's like, yeah, you're a mom, you're a doctor, you should, what? You're doing kung fu. You're like, I can do anything I want.
Yeah. Here's another one. Black people, you black, you do Kung Fu, my friend. You do Kung Fu? Oh, I'm like, yes, yes. My brown skin does do Kung Fu. You ever seen Kareem
Abdul
Abdul-Jabbar?
Jabbar, that's what I was gonna say.
Come on. But like there's all of these shoulds and shouldn'ts and ways that we think because of these filters, because of
Mm.
people who have grown up not seeing people that look like them doing kung fu. And I was just having this conversation with one of my instructors, like this is the reason why I perform. Me and my son perform so that when we go to schools, they see someone that looks like them, these kids, and they say, oh, I can do that. Yeah. I'm representing identities, various identities. Oh, you're a doctor and you're doing kung fu? Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and when you're talking about it, it made me think of like when I was, teenager and very much, early 90s, and so I was into the dress. Like I wanted to dress like Will Smith on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. People
Yeah.
go, Prince is your favorite musician? Shouldn't you like, which I do like hard rock and heavy metal or country music or whatever. It's like I can like what fills my soul. This is what I can relate to. Like I don't feel that I have to fit what you think I should be.
Exactly. I mean, I love Cyndi Lauper, and people might not know it, but I did love Twisted Sister.
All
I
right.
want to ride. You know, like that. I was around when MTV first got started.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
all of those people. Pat Benatar, Love is a Battlefield. I mean, come on. And so, like, you know, my friends would be like, what? But my Gen X friends, they would understand.
Yeah. Well, I think we had a neat melting pot going on in society at one time. And I saw whatever people's opinions are on the lockdown, especially in what I do, it was horrible for the recovery community. I mean, it really spiked where we're at now. It did. I mean, you know, we'll get the data soon and it'll be another year record overdose death rate again this year. I've no doubt about that. But what I really saw was people becoming like more divided, you know, news and social media. And it's really sad to see people's I shouldn't say all, but unwillingness to sit and just have conversations with people. It just doesn't seem to happen enough anymore.
Yeah, which is another reason I love these podcasts because I get to be in conversation with people who are this similar and who are very different.
Right.
And it allows for, I think, the more we converse, the more we connect. And what we do know when we bring it back to trauma is that connection mitigates trauma. And all of the trauma that's happened, like the racial tension, the violence, you know, addiction, the mental health, part of it is because of the isolation and the rhetoric that's been spread. And so, you know, I was just talking with one of my dojo parents yesterday, and or Saturday, and we were talking about the fact that we can honor each other's differences and celebrate our differences while recognizing the sameness that we
Mm,
are, you
mm,
know. And I think when we do that, and that's part of, again, you know, we are conditioned to at least, I would say, in the last however many years, 3 or 4 years, we've been conditioned to separate.
yeah,
We're conditioning, you know, ourselves to separate, and we need to recondition to connect.
I agree. Well, and let me get your take on this. I think being that, you know, naturally the brain will gravitate. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of year old machinery that sits in between our ears, you
That's
know,
right.
towards things that are danger. Why? To protect ourselves for, you know, longevity and all these different things. And to me, it seemed once we did that, you know, everyone to a certain extent became incredibly hyper aware. And I think society kind of has to hopefully will transform to turn some of these things off. Because if we, you know, we see this on the news or that on the news and we're being told all these things, and you know, I don't want to dive too deep into it, but I've known good cops and bad cops, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And it's these things that happen that are just really sad that all of a sudden it becomes a societal blanket over how it is, that's the enemy, this is the enemy. And at the end of the day, my worst enemy ever has been that man in the mirror, you know, as Michael, that's the one I'm going to change, you know? Um,
Absolutely. You know, God, that is such a great like pearl. Like the biggest enemy sometimes is our own selves. And what you're speaking to just in terms of like is the binary nature of thinking.
mm,
It's either us or them. It's either win or lose. It's either good or bad. It's either right or wrong, right? It's either good cop or bad cop. It's either, you know, Republican or Democrat. It's either this, you know, it's like so binary, right? And and again, that it, it pours more into the division, and it erases the complexity of the trauma, and it speaks to all of this speaks to the vicarious nature of trauma. So you're absolutely right. People are hypervigilant
mm,
because that's what trauma does. It causes the system to be hypervigilant, to be primed for threat, right? And so when we are always on the lookout, always looking over our shoulder, then everything we see, we say perception is projection. So if we're always looking for threat, everything we see is a threat.
mm-hmm,
If we're
mm-hmm,
looking for connection, then we're going to find connection. If we're looking for collaboration, we're going to find collaboration. If we're looking for solutions, we'll find solutions. But as long as we're looking for threat and we're looking for binary, right, wrong. All we're going to see is that.
Yeah.
That is the nature of trauma, of toxic stress and trauma.
Yeah. Well, and another, I'd love your take on this. You know, I don't know if I heard it somewhere or I've dubbed it, but like the headline culture, you know, the being informed part, I worked in media. We want to catch you with something catchy,
That's
but
right.
we're kind of in a day and age where people stop at the headline. We all have pretty vivid imaginations, and it sits pretty close to where our memory is up here in this wonderful noggin. And so
Yep.
we can make up some really good stories about what we think we've been informed on and run with it.
Absolutely. And you kind of spoke to it, earlier, but this is where our brain has this thing called cognitive shortcuts. Our brain is going to take the shortcut to fill the gaps in, and that's a very dangerous thing. Like there's a an absence these days of critical thinking and of allowing ourselves to really question, okay, well, what is it? What is the truth of that? What is the real truth of that? Rather than just read the headline, oh, I know what this is. Again, primed for threat,
Mm,
you know.
mm,
And so I think that we have to slow down and begin to question everything, including our own thinking, and really start to think critically and connect with others. And instead of assuming, like asking. And we ask ourselves the question, where is my trauma informing my vision
mm,
or what I'm seeing or how I'm reacting?
mm,
Like that is, I think, a key question we can ask ourselves. What am I telling myself? What's the story? And when's the first time I ever told that story? Why am I reacting to that? What am I actually reacting to, in fact? And when did I first react to that in that way and why?
right. You
Right?
brought, yeah,
It's
I
like,
think you mentioned it earlier, but we didn't really dig in. Is that a part of like cognitive restructuring?
yeah, it's
Okay.
it is. It is, it's that really looking at the very first incident and then looking at where the lies are.
Mm,
That's
mm,
the
mm.
short way for us there, right? Like find the lie. Find the lie in your belief. Where did you first get that belief? And then look at the incident and look at it from all angles. Like you were to have a rock in your hand, a stone in your hand, and you pick it up and you inspect it from all sides, and you can see all the differences, all the different vantage points. And that's one of the things we do in the particular NLP technique I was sharing with you about that releases trauma is it's like you inspect the belief or you inspect the incident, the very first incident of where the trauma occurred, and then you take something different away from it that feels empowering for you.
Yeah. What is it? It was cognitive restriction. So like 4 steps or something, or I forget what it is. I was reading on
It's
it, but I can't remember what they are.
Yeah. So, this particular, we call it, well, we call it something a little bit different, but it's similar. It's called
Mm,
timeline therapy. And it really is just finding the initial event, finding the source of the belief or the source of the emotion, and then looking at it from different vantage points, right? This is just a process that we do, and then taking what are the new learnings, right?
mm,
What did you believe and what do you now see?
mm.
So that would be the new learnings. What did you believe and what do you now see? And where are all the times that you had gathered evidence for that to be true that you can now release, and then coming back and being free of that belief or that incident.
Yeah. And is that really where we get really attached to those stories that we like about ourselves? And and
Correct.
and we have a really good here's my example in that we have a really good propensity to fulfill that belief is I came to a state of awareness of going, failed relationship, and finally gone, I don't think it's them. I think it's something with me that needs to change.
We would say, who's the common denominator?
Right? Yeah,
That's what we would
exactly.
say. Who's the common denominator?
I bet you get a lot of pushback on that.
You know, I think I say it in a way that people can laugh about it and get like, oh, when you develop that kind of rapport with
Sure.
with the people that you talk to, they're like, oh, touche.
Dang, I guess that is me. Uh, well, hey, we're gonna have to do this again down the line. You're wonderful. I just really appreciate this conversation. If people want to connect with you, Dr. Clairborne, how can they do so? And then I want to jump into those random questions.
Absolutely. They can find out more about the work that I do at mindremappingacademy.com. And that includes the speaking that I do for organizations, my trauma informed communication course, as well as the work that I do one on one in the certification. So, all of that is on mindremappingacademy.com. I do have a podcast called The Black Mind Garden. I'm teasing now that I'm actually going to be sunsetting that podcast and starting a new one.
Oh,
So I'll send you the link to that. The working name is Getting to the Root Cause with Dr. Maiysha.
I
So
love it.
that's that. So I'll send you the information on that. And then I'm on all social media except for X.
Uh,
LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook are probably the best three for me, and it's / Dr. Maiysha.
all right. Well, I'll put those links in the podcast description, make it easy for the listener to check it out. And I don't know how I mastered it. I've had other people say, "Oh, X on my feed." All I get is recovery, Formula One, and NBA news in my feed now. I don't know how I've mastered that, but it's worked out. It's like, okay, my three biggest interests other than my family
Good
and
stuff.
spiritual stuff every now and then too. But all right, here we go. So this is just for fun here. Best and worst advice you ever received, if you can recollect.
Best and worst advice. Oh my God, these are good questions. I'm gonna say the best advice that I ever got is um, other people's opinions are none of my business.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
was probably the best advice, the best coaching that I've gotten. Worst advice. Oh man. Um, oh, I guess the worst advice that I've ever gotten when I was in college and I was applying to med school was by a professor who just didn't see me, that saw the color of my skin, and he told me not to go to medical school.
Oh Lord. Yeah,
Worst
we
advice ever.
yeah, we don't need more of those people.
Right.
The funny thing is if he was blind, he wouldn't have had anything to say,
Exactly.
right? If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Ooh. Um, what is the superpower where you can is it it's trans
Like teleport?
teleportation.
Okay.
That's the superpower. I would, if I could have any superpower, hands down, it'd be teleportation. That I can go see all my friends whenever I want, see my family whenever I want. Don't have to pay the high prices of plane rides, and we could just jet set
Right. Oh,
or
yeah.
teleport.
And cut down on the I mean, being a parent as well and the functions and running around. It would be so nice to be like, hold on, kids, here we go.
That's right. Keep me up, Scotty.
Exactly. Um, I always find this one fun. If a movie was made about your life, what genre would you like it to be, and who would you want to play adult you?
Oh my gosh, what genre would it be? I think that if there was a movie made about me, it would probably I would love it to be sort of like maybe a comedy drama. Yeah, comedy drama. And who would play me? I think that what's coming to my mind right off the cuff is Taraji P.
Hmm.
Henson. You
Not
know,
familiar with her.
um, she plays. Oh my gosh, she played in the first time I saw her was in the show. What's the name of that show? Man, I can't even remember the name of the show. But she played in the show with Terrence Howard, um,
Ah, what
Lucius. Yes, yes, that show.
was that the
She
one
played
Terrence Howard when wasn't he like a music mogul or
music. Yes.
okay. Now
Yep.
I know who
She
you're
played
talking
opposite
about.
of him. But
Okay.
even before that, she played in this other one. She was a police officer, and there was this machine, and the machine like watched everyone, and there was she was the police officer. That was the first time I ever saw her in that. But she was in the Color Purple, the new Color Purple.
Oh, okay. I haven't watched it yet. It's in that list of so many things to watch
Yeah, to do
to
right.
find time.
Yes.
Uh um I'm gonna challenge you. What if we made your movie a martial arts movie?
Hmm. I think it would definitely be comedy,
All right.
comedy action. Yeah,
That's all right.
I can see
There's
there
been a
being some
few.
martial arts in there. I would say it would have to be like comedy superhero if martial arts were involved.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Makes sense. Makes sense. Let me see. Let's do two more here. If you could have dinner with any one person, living or not, who would they be?
I think I would love to have dinner with Snoop Dogg.
I gotta know the why on this.
I think, from just looking at his career and the way he's moved in his life is just very interesting and intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
From being this rapper, um, gangster or not gangster, I don't know for real if he was a gangster, but like to watch him evolve and become a businessman and work with Mark the Steward. Now he's got, the children's music out and children's empowering music. He's got a very interesting career.
Yeah.
And I wonder how his mind worked.
Yeah. No, he is a fascinating individual, it, and I and I hope if people look at that is the idea of people don't change or that was I'm so tired of hearing that being said.
Right.
Like how the man evolved, how much of a caring father he is, and
Yeah.
it's yeah. Eventually, we always got to get to that point of giving back, right?
Yes. And that's what I love about it is that
Yeah.
he's just the way he's moved, like, working with all different types of people and I still love his rap. And I just think he's so like he's got swag, But but if you've ever heard his children's songs, it's just so it's so cute, adorable.
Oh,
Like Snoop and adorable. What an interesting combination.
yeah. My partner, she's a special ed teacher, little kids, the pre-K or TK, whatever it is, and I believe she has used some of his songs in class with these kids.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is where I like to give you the floor. Anything you would want to lend for, people that are struggling or just through your knowledge.
The thing that I really love to leave people with is that even though sometimes we can feel like we're alone, we are not. And if you can find, even if it's just one person to connect with, one person that you feel safe with. And I do know that the phone weighs 1,000 pounds and sometimes 10,000 pounds. Those are the people who could save your life. And it's not to put a big burden on that person, but it's just to be like that committed listener, that pause just long enough to reach out to that person and to be a part of that community. And I know that from the hard way. Like I learned that intuitively. And I've been in those dark moments in those dark spaces. And so what has brought me out of it, what has helped me to heal, what has brought me the most joy is community. And what keeps me on the path and is having those committed listeners. So I think, you know, to end with connection mitigates trauma. Connect, 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 and find the safe spaces for which you can.
Dr. Clairborne, thank you so very much for your time. This has been an absolute pleasure and honor.
It has been such a pleasure. I definitely look forward to keeping in touch.
Absolutely. And on that note, keep knocking doors down.